Hi, folks. Welcome to our second question related to our case. You remember in the on the first page when we were describing some of the information in the case, we said that in addition to hiring some sales reps, we would also have to be hiring some production workers. That was right here, production supervisors. So now we've developed a little series of questions related to that. So it says here that the new production facility is going to be opening in Ontario in January 2014. It's going to have state-of-the-art technology. The company needs to hire 3 new supervisors, and each supervisor is going to supervise 5 production employees. Jim McDonald is the production manager, and he's responsible for working with you as the HR person to hire some new supervisors. But you were off sick, but Jim decided he's going to take charge of the recruitment process and move it forward. So we did some telephone calls, and he called Margaret Day. Margaret has 6 years of experience in a production environment supervising employees. Jim thought it was rare that a female would have experience working in production in a supervisory capacity. So he suggested to Margaret that she should take a personality test so he could feel more comfortable with a female supervising factory workers, and she agreed to take the test. Now, it said that during the telephone screening process, Jim told Margaret that she wouldn't be shown any favors by the male staff, and she would have to pull her weight on the factory floor. Jim impressed upon her that she would be the only female supervisor, and he asked her how her husband would feel about it. Jim also told Margaret that she could not expect to be given any special privileges like taking time off to look after sick children or leaving early to pick her children up from school. And when you returned to work, you as the HR manager, you found that Jim had hired the needed supervisors. But you had a telephone call from Margaret Day when you got back, and she learned that she had not been selected for the job, but she did discover that the 3 new supervisors that were hired all had less experience than she did, and none of them were asked to undergo a personality test. Another issue was brought to your attention as the new supervisors started their first day, and Jim met with you and told you that one of the supervisors is a practicing Muslim, and he asked for permission for a 15-minute break at sundown, and he wanted to pray, and Jim told you that he refused. So the questions we have for you here are, number 1, do you think Margaret was treated fairly, and tell us why? Use the case facts. So the answer obviously is no, Margaret wasn't treated fairly. And why was that? She was the only applicant that was asked to take a test. Don't forget, if testing is going to be relevant in your selection process, you need to make sure that that test is given to all of the candidates to see how they perform. She was also asked an illegal question on how her husband would feel if she was the only female supervisor. So in other words, she's being judged based on her marital status, right? So 3 people were hired, all with less direct experience related to the job. So for these 3 reasons, this whole process was very unfair to Margaret. Now we want you to identify 2 weaknesses in the selection process. So notice we've given you 3, but we're only asking for 2. And we want you to identify 1 human rights violation. 2 weaknesses in the selection process. And we did give you 2, but we also asked you to identify a human rights violation committed by Jim, which is here. Well, 1 weakness is there was no HR person present. So probably if we had an HR person doing the telephone interviewing and the screening, probably Margaret would have never been asked a lot of the questions she was asked by phone, and we wouldn't have these human rights issues that we have now. There was also no apparent selection process in place. We don't know if there was a reference check. Was there a panel interview? Who made this decision? Was it Jim on his own? How could he do that, right? And of course, now the human rights issues. First of all, there was intentional discrimination, or what we call differential treatment, because Margaret was the only one tested. All right? So that shouldn't have happened. The other human rights issue, and again, we only asked for 1 human rights issue, but there were 2, is one of reasonable accommodation, because Jim insinuated that Margaret would not be accommodated with her child care issues. Okay? And he does have a duty to accommodate unless there is undue hardship present. Now, don't forget, undue hardship would be something that would cause financial burden to the company. And certainly an accommodation to Margaret, if she had child care issues, is probably not going to break the company's bank, right? Now, the third question here relates to as a human resources professional, what advice would you give Jim on the new supervisor, a practicing Muslim who requested time off to pray? Well, the fact that Jim didn't give him the time constitutes unlawful discrimination under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Employees are allowed under the Human Rights Code of Ontario to observe religious practices unless, again, it's going to cause the company undue hardship. And it would be very difficult for the company to show undue hardship when all this person wants is 15 minutes off to pray. So what kind of accommodation could you make, right? So you would advise Jim that he can make accommodation, and what could he do? He could have a modified break policy, so maybe instead of having your break during the day, when other people would normally be having their break, maybe just shortly after lunch or whatever, maybe he has this as 5:30, right? Maybe there's flexible hours, so maybe 15 minutes that he might be getting to pray, maybe that 15 minutes would have to be made up in another way, right? And maybe provide a private area for devotion. We have one here at the college, actually. We have a private room for religious observances. So again, that can be done. Now, if you wanted to learn more about some of the Ontario Human Rights position on religious issues and accommodation, if you click that link, you'll come to this area of the Human Rights Commission website, and it's specific here. It says, where a rule conflicts with religious requirements, there's a duty to ensure that individuals are able to observe their religion unless this would cause undue hardship because of cost or health or safety reasons. And again, a 15-minute observance is not going to cause undue hardship related to cost, health, or safety. Unlawful discrimination because of religion can include refusing to make an exception to dress code, and here, refusing to allow individuals to observe periods of prayer at particular times during the day. So it's based on this item here, okay, that Jim would have been committing unlawful discrimination. So again, in fact, we would need to make sure that Jim did accommodate the employee. And HR, again, would be in a better position than most organizations to know what's discriminatory practice under the Human Rights Code. So in other words, you would have to provide some kind of reasonable accommodation under that area of the code. Okay? So now, this concludes our presentation on the second question in your case. So hopefully this review has helped you to understand a little bit better on how you could be asked a question that would test your ability to apply some of the learning you've had so far in the course. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review series and enjoy your day.